Season winter testing. The next time we see the cars on the track, it'll be in FP1 in Melbourne in Australia. So who had a good week, who had a bad week? Well, Nico Rosberg finished the week on top of the timesheets with a time of 1 minute 20.130, 131 laps for him in the car today. Fernando Alonso, second fastest, also second fastest of the week, a 1 minute 20.494 and 120 laps in the Ferrari for him today. Jenson Button, third fastest in the McLaren, was a lot lower down the timesheets for most of the day today though, but finally with a 121.444, 122 laps for him in the car today. Nico Hülkenberg, who had his race simulation brought to a stop briefly, just as his teammate Esteban Gutierrez did yesterday. Well, he put in a 121.541 and did manage to get in 118 laps today on the final day of testing. And Kimi Räikkönen in the Lotus this afternoon, just 7 minutes of running this morning in the morning session though, after a gearbox problem in the Lotus, but he posted a 121.658, just 50 laps though in the car for him today, and that 50 laps is all he's had this week following that food poisoning bout yesterday. Sebastian Vettel, 8th fastest today, following on from where Mark Webber was around 7th fastest yesterday. Just how much are Red Bull hiding in that car? A 122.514, but it's not really about the time for them. We won't see their true colours, I'm sure, until Melbourne. Finally, Valtteri Bottas was back in the Williams this afternoon as well, a time of 122.524 from him, slower than his teammate Maldonado though. It'll be interesting to see how Williams fare. The midfield looks really bunched up, and we'll talk to Johnny Herbert later too as to how he thinks the field will pan out when we get to the first race. But this is it, this is the paddock packing up. The teams are heading to Australia and so are the drivers. Let's hear from some of them now. From the showing the cars given us this morning, you're going to blow everyone else away this year.
No, that's definitely not the case. As we all know, you need to be very careful with testing, with results and everything, because you just don't know what other people are doing. And we know for a fact that competitors haven't shown their potential by far. We know that for sure. So definitely need to be very, very careful. What I can say, of course, is that we made progress, and I'm pleased with the way the winter has gone. Everything has gone to plan. The reliability has been sorted out. And then what also needs to be said, then Melbourne is completely different conditions again. Yeah, hot. Pleased is probably the best word. Yeah, but need to wait and see.
And how happy are you? You've been with Mercedes a while, you're part of the family. How happy are you with the significant step that you've made forward, that the team's made forward?
Well, I don't know if we've made a big step forward yet. We need to wait and see for Melbourne, yeah. For sure I can see in the factory that everything's working better. And so at this point I can also thank everybody back at the factory for all the hard work until now. It's been really nice to see. And everything has come together well up to now, in testing. Even the reliability and all these last minute things that had to be done, everything worked out. So that gave us a good winter test, but performance-wise, we still need to wait for Melbourne to see where we are.
How's the car been handling this morning?
Yeah, I think not bad. Baseline is still good. I think not entirely happy with the handling, with the balance of the car. So I think we can still improve. We still got some homework to do prior to Melbourne, but otherwise, yeah.
And is this the car you'll have in Melbourne, or will there be new bits?
Yeah, it's always ongoing, and depends what we find today. If the aero guys find something, if the vehicle dynamics guys find something, then I'm sure they will, they will manufacture some new parts if they think it's gonna be much useful.
We can be pretty happy. Obviously, the last 2 days, a lot of the people decided to put some fast lap times in. I think, if you sum up the whole 3 tests, then I think we were all limited to what the tires could do. It was extremely difficult to, read some setup changes and find a direction with the car, because the tires were simply not good enough. I think the last 2 days were fairly good in terms of weather, blue sky, sunshine. It wasn't very cold and the asphalt was quite warm, but the tires were still poor, so we need to see and look into the data now between now and Melbourne to understand a little bit more, and then we probably know what expects us in Australia and for the beginning of the season. But it could all be different, so therefore I think lap times are not that important, and where we are now in the timesheet is not that important.
Sebastian, do you feel the man with the target on your back going to Australia?
Sorry?
Do you feel the man with the target on your back, the man to beat going to Australia?
Well, I think we never had a winter that was less conclusive than this one, because tires last, if anything, 1 lap, and then for some people maybe different than others, depending how much temperature you're able to create. So I think it's impossible to read the the pace of the car, and therefore to make out the favourites, I think it's not really that easy, but we'll know in Australia.
With this year being an evolution in terms of the very small rule changes, do you feel that maybe you're not going to be able to make such a big step during the season as you did last year?
Yeah, you always tend to think that, but then the people from the aero department turn out with some new parts, and there's always going to be a step. So I think the target is there to really improve the car by a lot, use the time in the races that we have, but for now, for sure, is to understand a little bit more with the new parts that we put on the car and find the right direction.
So, Pastor, that's it. Next stop, Melbourne. Sum up the winter testing for Williams.
Yeah, we are quite happy. No problems during the winter test. So it's a great start point to be, and we are looking forward for Melbourne now. We still have a week to work very hard to analyze the data, and we feel confident. We'll see.
That's good to hear. You've got a lot of different ideas on the car, a lot of new stuff. Have they all come together?
Yeah, we are trying to learn from the car. Remember that we have 4 days less than the other teams, so still there is something to learn from the car, and we are full focus on it. Our guys are working very hard, so I hope to be there from the first race.
So that's it then for pre-season winter testing. The teams are packing up and heading down under to Australia for the first race of the 2013 season. I'm joined now by Johnny Herbert from Sky Sports F1 HD. So Johnny, who's going to win in Australia?
Oh, what a hard question that's going to be. Very difficult one to read what's gone on. The Red Bull didn't really show its hands. We saw the Mercedes very, very quick as well. It seems as if McLaren have a problem. So it's quite a difficult one once again in testing to read.
Let's dissect it then further. Jerez. The 3 weeks started badly for Mercedes. Those 2 awful days, just 29 laps in the first 2 days for them. And then they leave here, top of the timesheets, both their drivers both days. What can we read into that? Can we read anything into it?
I think we can actually with Mercedes, because I think, yes, it started sort of badly in Jerez itself, and in Barcelona last time around and this time around, they always seem to be quite aggressive with the tyre, which this circuit is. But what they did seem to be able to do was turn the car around and actually turn it into quite a soft car on its tyres, and the 1 lap sort of runs that it did were very, very good. Also the long runs. Nico Rosberg today did some really, really good consistent lap time, so they seem to have really worked hard in a methodical way, and they seem to have produced a very, very good car before they get to Australia.
Well, let's then look at the other end of the spectrum then. In the Red Bull, yesterday Mark Webber 7th, Sebastian Vettel today not posting a very quick lap.
You're right in saying that they didn't sort of show that raw speed, but that's something we can always normally read, that they have 60 or 70 kilos of fuel on board and they don't sort of reduce it. That's what it looked like this time around. And if we sort of take all that fuel out and see what they will have at the end of that in a lap time, which you can work out is about 3/10 for 10 kilos, I think it is, they will actually be at the head of the pack. So Sebastian may be playing a game, and it was interesting actually seeing him on track right at the end of the session with Fernando Alonso following him. It didn't allow him to follow, just so he couldn't show him how good that Red Bull looks as if it is, because on track, I have to say, it does look very, very secure.
You mentioned Fernando Alonso there. Nice little battle between him and Nico Rosberg, swapping top of the timesheets today. Ferrari undoubtedly have had a better winter than they had last winter. What do you make of their car?
Yeah, I think, again, it looks very, very good on track. It was a little bit nervous when Fernando had the hard tyres right at the end, but again, the temperatures come down quite a lot in the afternoon session, so that's probably where that window has changed for the tyres. But overall, I think they do seem to have a competitive car compared to last year. It seems to be in a better position for them at this point, because he's talking about new pieces coming, new aerodynamic pieces coming in Melbourne. Now, that may be a good sign for them. If those pieces work when they get on the car in Melbourne, I think it could be quite a good, strong start for Ferrari. And I think also for the constructors' point of view, Felipe Massa seems to be driving very well as well. So now they've got 2 drivers starting the season in a much better Ferrari.
McLaren, bit of a quandary this one. What do we make of the performance? You had a chance to look more in detail at the laps as well. What have you made of the car and of the body language as well of the two drivers?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at Jerez when they came out of the box, everyone was actually quite impressed with how quick it was, and Jensen was even saying very positive things. They seem to have sort of faded away here, and because they've changed the pull rod and push rod and made it in a different direction, because I think at the end of the day last season they feel that they had come to sort of the end of the development of that car, so they've changed it, and now they've got to sort of relearn how that car works. But I think they didn't look so bad, and I honestly think when we go to Australia, that suits Jensen, that suits McLaren. So I think they have a very good chance of being competitive there, and I think equally that will move on to Malaysia at the same time. So again, it's quite hard to read, but they did look quite aggressive on the tyres here in Barcelona.
Now Kimi is very relaxed, he's very chilled out, he's known as the Iceman, but even he must be ruffled slightly by the winter testing he's had. Not too many laps in the previous two tests. He comes here, he's unwell for a whole day and misses a day in the car, and he only gets really an afternoon today, 7.5 minutes of the morning session today. How is he going to be feeling, and what do you make of that, Lotus? Have they got real concerns there?
Well, personally, I think what we saw with Romain Grosjean when he was in the car this test, they look very, very good, very, very good in long runs. Romain was doing some really good, again, consistent times. I think this is where I keep repeating myself, but I think it's going to be really tight when we get to Australia. But the Lotus does look very, very good once again. But we did talk about this last year. I think they're in a better situation, but with Kimi obviously being ill yesterday, he probably wasn't in the best sorts in today, but at least he get in the car, he can have a bit of a feel, see what it's like, and then he knows what he's got when he gets to Melbourne. They, to me, look actually in very good condition.
What about the midfield pack? We're looking at the Saubers, the Force India, the Williams. At one point, they were sort of only split by 0.2 of a second today. What do you make of the midfield?
Well, I think Adrian Suter actually was the guy who impressed me, because he's been out for over a year. He seemed to be able to jump in the car straight away and was very competitive. And even in this today's session, again, he was very good as well. So I think he seems to have really adapted very, very positively. I think Nico Hulkenberg as well in the Sauber, that doesn't seem to be too bad as well. I think there's a little bit of a gap to the sort of the top teams, but I think it's going to be really tight overall, because I think because of the rules haven't changed, everybody's been able to close the gap, and maybe that's where Red Bull hasn't been able to pull away, because they're sort of almost at the limit of the design of the car with the rules that we have. But because of that, I think it's just going to be fascinating how that sort of pans out in Australia, in the heat of qualifying and the race, and then we will really see who is going to be the fastest and who's going to be challenging for the World Championship.
And finally, the best of the rest. Who impressed you? I mean, Kerr's now from Marussia, they've got Jules Bianchi in the car. What do you make of the situation at the back end of the field?
Yeah, I think Jules Bianchi did a very good job. He seemed to settle in very, very quickly. It's probably been fortunate that he had some runs with Force India last year. He had a bit of running in the Force India this time around as well. So he hasn't been out of the car, so he's been able to jump into, okay, a different car that probably has less downforce than the Force India or the Ferrari especially. But I think it's a good pairing with him and Max. Max and him have been in GP2 together, not as teammates, but racing against each other, so they know each other very well. Max is really the real rookie going into this season, and he can learn a lot from Jules, because he's a really nice young man who's got a really nice sort of idea of what he needs and how he needs to get it, and the experience, and I think he's already come out and said the experience he's had with Ferrari and Force India will be, I think, quite vital for Marussia. And of course then you've got Caterham with two rookies with Van der Garde and Charles Pic, where that's a little bit of a different situation. Of course Charles has more experience in Formula One than Van der Garde, but I think equally so, they did actually seem to sort of really get it together in this today session basically, and I think they're in a stronger position to do a real, I think, close battle together. Unfortunately it'll be at the back of the field, but hopefully as time goes on they'll actually be able to close the gap to that midfield guys.
Johnny, thanks very much for joining me.
No problem.
That's it then for pre-season winter testing. The paddock is packing up now, the trucks move forward and the lorries get loaded and sent on their way. We will see you next at the first Grand Prix of the 2013 season. Every practice, every qualifying, every race live on Sky Sports F1 HD. We'll see you in Australia.